No nation can preserve its freedom in the midst of counter-warfare, James Madison wrote in his book, a view supported by Gerard Hanaud in a publication titled The Counter-Revolution of 1776, depicting the American War of Independence. In the book, he made it clear that no government can win a war against its own citizens. By this, he referred to the American War of Independence and drawing inspiration from the Boston Tea Party. It is also similar in nations across the globe that counter-revolution is gaining steam and momentum. An example is that which we had in Colombia, moving to the FARC rebels of Colombia. We are also experiencing that in Ethiopia with the Tigray region. Sudan experienced that. South Sudan also experienced it. And we are also experiencing that in Somalia as we speak right now. A similar situation is plaguing in Afghanistan. Vietnam witnessed similar situation. The nations that have been on for counter-revolution, there are so many, and examples are so glaring that no nation can win a war against its own people. It is very clear as we witness in Cameroon, in the restive northwest and the southwest region of the country, a war that has been on for 5 years now, yet the situation is deplorable and is moving from bad to worse. You may even have a different adjective to describe it depending on your political affiliation in which you have. Though some members of the Cameroon People's Democratic Movement will say there is progress in the war as far as reducing violence is concerned. However, it is now left for those who are genuine to look at it and tell us if there is progress or not. 5 years on, what needs to be done? That has not been done since the conflict started. Cameroon government has been very consistent in stating that dialogue is a process, and they've always been truncating and blowing the trumpet that dialogue has been ongoing since the conflict started, drawing inspiration from the Interministerial Ad Hoc Committee in 2016, where we had 2 committees set up. One was in Bamenda under Paul Migot Gogomo, and one was in Yaoundé, which was for the lawyers, and that for Bamenda was for the teachers. However, we also had the Grand Major National Dialogue September 2018, where we had the Grand Major National Dialogue, or 2019, where we had the Grand Major National Dialogue, and that fallout, a lot of resolutions were reached at. A recommendation, to be more precise, we saw the Prime Minister, head of government in Boya, where he stated emphatically that he has come to look at the level of implementation of recommendations that were reached at the Grand Measure National Dialogue. The government has created the Bilingualism Commission, created the disarmament, demobilization centers. The government also has created the House of Chiefs and gave a special status to the people of the Northwest and the Southwest region. The government also has granted amnesty to some prisoners who were also arrested in connection with the ongoing Anglophone crisis. The government says they are willing to dialogue, which is a process with those agitating and fighting for the ongoing conflict in the Northwest and the Southwest region. Regardless of all these things that have been done by the government, the conflict is still on. The Cameroon Minister of Delegate in charge of the president, in charge of defense of the presidency, was in Bamenda to review the military strategy. In the same time, we watched and saw a communique signed by the spokesperson of Cameroon military that was in September, talking about the killings in Bamising, in which it is now clear that Cameroon is at war based on the communique. The communique stated emphatically that those terrorists fighting in the Northwest and the Southwest region are receiving support from other terrorists in different nations who are coming now to attack Cameroon. Which option the head of state has to arrest the situation? This is House of Commons with me, Tah Mai Javis. You're welcome from that transition. If you are just joining us, you're watching House of Commons. To begin the program, I introduce to you my guest with whom we are going to have a 1 hour 30-minute ride on this discussion today, where we are revisiting civil and military cooperation, drawing inspiration from the communique that was issued out following the Bamising attack by the spokesperson of the Cameroon Ministry
no-go zone. It's quite unsafe and tricky for them. But all the same, we thank God we are here, we are alive, notwithstanding the challenges on the ground. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Also, we have Mr. Tchameni, who is also here with us. He is a seasoned politician and someone who understands the political landscape across the globe and also that in Africa, and has an understanding as of how Cameroon political landscape can be handled for posterity to ensure that there is full democracy and respect of human rights and freedom, above all respect of the Constitution. Sir, you're welcome.
Thank you, sir.
And happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday to you and then to your telespectators.
Thank you very much for joining us. And of course, we have Mr. Ngalim in the United States of America. He's a human rights advocate who has a track record of human rights, fighting human rights for the respect of rights of people. Mr. Ngalim, it's a privilege to have you.
Thank you very much, Javis, for having me on the program. It's always a pleasure to be on this program, and it's more a delight to share the program with the likes of Barrister Nkea and Mr. Djeukam. It's a pleasure to be here again.
Thank you very much. How is the U.S. doing?
I think everything is fine. Besides the COVID and the normal racist problems that we have around the place, everything is fine. The economy is bouncing back, though very slowly. But we think with time, the human rights situation, or America's view on the human rights situation on this conflict in Cameroon is going to be reviewed and put at the right place within the international community for some steps to be taken.
Thank you very much. We kickstart the program by me reading through the communique, which is going to be our center of discussion today. And of course, the communique date September 20th, 2020. If a technical team can put that communique on it, display it while I read. The Minister of Defense hereby communicates on the evening of Thursday, 16 September 2021, a convoy of the 6th Rapid Intervention Battalion on a reconnaissance mission was the target of an ambush of heavily armed terrorists in the locality of Bamensin, Dop subdivision, Gokitunja division of the Northwest region. Using an improvised device, IED, and an anti-tank rocket launch, the insurgents immobilized the vehicles of the defense forces before opening heavy fire on the latter, who were seriously incapacitated by the detonation of the explosive charges. These events are occurring barely a few days after another improvised explosive device attack on another military convoy on the morning of Sunday, 12 September 2021, on the Kumbu Tatum Aziz Kikaikom locality, Kumbu subdivision, Bui division of the Northwest region. The cumulative toll of this attack is about 15 soldiers and several civilians killed, as well as 3 vehicles damaged. The minister delegate at the presidency in charge of defense conveys to the families of the fallen soldiers and civilians the sincere condolence of the head of state, commander-in-chief of the armed forces, as well as his wishes for quick recovery of the survivors. It should be recalled that this new attack was like the previous ones carried out in contempt of international humanitarian law. Similarly, the use of highly charged explosives against the defense and security forces, as well as civilian population, is in urban and pre-urban areas, or even the camouflage in civilian population, or the use of them as human shield, is an unspeakable barbarism. It should be noted that intelligence services have established with certainty that the resurgence of these terrorist groups by means of quality firearms they have at their disposal and are systematically using is largely the result of their joint forces with other terrorist entities operating outside the country's borders. It is thus clear that the coming into play of higher capacity explosive and new weapons undoubtedly enshrine a paradigm change in ongoing operations, with the defense and security forces having a mission to do everything possible to restore peace and guarantee the free movement of persons, goods, and the capital through the national territory. In an event In any event, the Cameroon Army remains determined to eradicate all forms of violence in the northwest, southwest, far north regions areas in which it is now clearly established that there exist sophisticated armed links and exchanges between secessionist terrorists from the northwest and southwest region with external violent fundamental groups. Signed, Atonfak Gumu Siri Search, Head of Communication Division. That's a communique. I'll start with you, Barrister Nkea. You are a legal mind. You've read through this communique. It is now clear that Cameroon is at war.
Mr. Javis, I think that from a legal perspective, when you read a document of this nature, you want to look at the context in which it was issued and the language that is used. That is how you interpret a legal document. I mean, interpret a document from a legal perspective. And looking at the context of this communique, it is clear that it was issued at a time when there was intensification of fighting, intensification of weaponry used by whom you can call the separatist, and also it is a confession from the state authorities that there is the conflict has morphed from what they used to describe as local domestic terrorism to international terrorism, and it is also suggests that it also brings into question the legal regime that should regulate the activities, the combat, the fighting in the both northwest and southwest at the moment. Because when you look at it, for example, the communique makes mention of insurgents, and you ask yourself, what is the meaning of insurgents at law? In the context of combat, what is insurgents? It makes reference to international humanitarian law, which is also an indication that the government of Cameroon is now suggesting that the fighting, the conflict should be regulated by international humanitarian law and no longer by the domestic laws of Cameroon. It also tells you, it makes reference to, yes, I've made reference to that point when it talks about other terrorist entities operating from outside the country. That is also an admission that the fight, the conflict is no longer that which can be regulated by the domestic terrorism legislations in Cameroon, but by other acts of international instruments that addresses international terrorism. That is one aspect of what I immediately look at. And if you look at it from this perspective, and you want to first of all ask yourself the meaning of an insurgent, you get the feeling that from a loose literal translation and even from legal translation, it is when a group of people are fighting, are taking up arms against the government. You can call them a rebel movement or something like that, with the aim of either cutting what you call a redentist movement, trying to cut out some territory of the state in terms of secession or separation, and or a kind of rebel movement that also intends to topple the government in power. Now, and when you look at these words, they have not been used by coincidence. They have been used by somebody who is well trained in the military and well trained in communication. So it means that it is an indication that they are accepting that the intention of the separatist fighters for the moment is to take up arms against the government. And when something happens, you ask yourself, what is the legal regime that should regulate the activities in the northwest and the southwest region at the moment? Because you would want to realize or to accept that in the past 5 years we have had increased military activities, increased militarization of the northwest and southwest regions. We have had reports and if from reputable organizations like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and some of these even in international crisis group, which have suggested that the military has been engaged in certain activities that have gone to the extent of pillaging villages, destroying villages, and then you ask yourself, under what legal regime are these military activities being regulated? For me, that is what I look at in terms of the conflict. Not just that the people are fighting, but what is the legal regime that regulates this conflict? And I say so because our country is supposed to be regulated by law. We are supposed to have a constitution, and we are supposed to have laws that regulate activities of this nature. For example, when you look at Section 9 of the Constitution of this country, it tells you that there are times that, or certain issues that can provoke the head of state to make certain pronouncements with regards to a state of emergency, a state of siege, and or siege, as some people will call it, pronounce it. And then you also have laws in place on maintenance of law and order in Cameroon, the 1990 law on maintenance of law and order, which also allows administrative authorities to requisition the military to take certain exceptional measures in certain circumstances to guarantee peace and order. But again, you want to ask yourself, so what actually is the legal regime that we're now operating in? Because by this communique, the Ministry of Defense has admitted that we have an emergency situation, that Cameroon is no longer functioning as it ought to be, and that but then once there is this kind of pronouncement, which one would have expected since 2016 when this conflict started, because there was increased militarization, conflict, armed struggle from both sides, one would have expected that the Cameroonian nation be clearly advised on what legal regime is currently affecting the people of the Northwest and the Southwest regions in the context of this conflict. Because when you know the legal regime that is in place, the legal regime that is in force, you know what legal remedies, what legal measures you can employ in terms of vindicating certain rights or challenging certain actions. And that is where I think that we have a lapse. There is a huge gap in that regard, because if you look at Section 9 of the Constitution, it states that it is only the head of state who can make certain pronouncements, which he has not done, because he has there's a method that he has to do that, which is by a decree, which he hasn't done. So we don't know at the moment whether Cameroon is in, whether the Northwest and Southwest regions of Cameroon, to which this communique is relevant, is under a state of siege, is under a state of emergency, or is under a state of exception. These are concepts that are not which are not synonymous. These are concepts that are not synonymous, and they have their own implication and their own effects on liberties, rights, human rights, and freedoms.
Okay.
And so we will look at that when I pick up the mic again. I'll try to address on the lapses that we have under Section 9.
Okay. Before going to Mr. Djeukam, let's take on this brief advert, and we'll come back so that we'll come with him.
C'est aussi la rentrée sur les bouquets Canal+. Le décodeur HD Canal+ est à 5 000 francs en ce moment au lieu de 10 000 et l'installation est gratuite. Avec plus de 200 chaînes, c'est l'heure d'apprendre et de se cultiver tous les jours. de retrouver la Ligue des Champions, les grands championnats de foot européens, les compétitions africaines, de se divertir avec les meilleurs films et séries. N'oubliez pas, le décodeur HD Canal Plus est à 5000 francs et l'installation est gratuite. Tarifs et conditions dans tous les points de vente Canal Plus dans la limite des stocks disponibles.
You're welcome back from that brief break. Sir, you just listened to Barrister Nkea talked about the aspect that there is the legal framework under which this war is regulated. It means that the war now has gone a level where the international laws are supposed to take precedence as far as this is concerned. We are 5 years on. I remember when you came here last 3 Sundays ago, and you talked about the fact that the only way that this conflict can come to an end is when a referendum is introduced, and that referendum will mean that the Northwest and Southwest region will have a kind of a veto where it will take 9 states to agree, 9 votes to agree on what needs to be done, the system that needs to be put in place. It means if one of the region, either Northwest or Southwest, vote against, it will not be put in place. They will go back to the dialogue table.
Thank you very much. But before I delve into the issue of the day, I wanted to express my deep sorrow, at the death of all the innocent people, Cameroonians that have been dying for the past 5 years or so. Send my condolences to the families of the deceased of both camps, because at the end of the day, they are all Cameroonians. And usually from poor families, be it on the side of the soldiers and then on the side of the Amber boys that are fighting. And then also express my solidarity to the refugees in Nigeria, as well as the hundred thousands of internally displaced people. I live in Bonaberi, and then I know what it is. It is that life shattered. It's extraordinary suffering. And then not to speak of those that remain in the Northwest and Southwest region that are in a constant state of fear from both the army that must protect them and the Amber boys that seem not to have any controlling political entity. So this expresses the urgency to put an end to this war, and then the need for all of us to think and contribute in any manner that is possible to help not fuel the world, not throw oil on the fire, but rather find a sustainable solution to this problem, which is a clearly political issue. Of course, political issues have legal ramifications, like the barrister just said there, but I am not a legal expert, so I will not. In fact, I will just be listening to him and then learning from him about those different regimes, état de siège, emergency, state of emergency, and all that. But what is clear is that we have a failed political leadership, because normally we can have a Navy captain be the one to make such an announcement when the head of state is the chief of the army, and then he says nothing. And of course, putting us in this situation where they are announcing to us that we are under foreign attack, because up to now, the doctrine was that it's a case of extreme case of law of order. That you have some young people, took up arms and bandits that are kidnapping people and getting ransom and stuff like that. But now they send a communicator of the army to say, no, we have some foreign people that have invaded the country, literally. And it passes like a small communique, and then the head of state is silent. For me, this is from a political point of view, and that's how I look at this thing all throughout. It's for me a case of failed leadership, and then it is this type of absentee leadership, or some sort of absenteeism mixed with a form of arrogance, I would say, that is the cause, or one of the causes of this conflict, in fact. Because when you see in 2016 the issues that were being raised, had the president play his role as the head of state and then say, look, my people are raising a problem, and let me take this thing under serious advisement and then provide a solution. No, he didn't do that. He treated them.
The head of state said there was an interministerial committee called by the head of state. He gave a firm instruction that was called in Bamenda, and one was called in Yaoundé. The one in Bamenda was for the lawyers, and the one in for the teachers. The one in Yaoundé was for the lawyers, and that Balising commission was created. It
would be dishonest to say that nothing happened. But the problem is that when you are solving a political issue, you have to take into account two things. One, the actual measures that you are taking. Second, the way you go about doing them and the timing with which you do it. By the time, if you beat people, if people come to you and then they're expressing peacefully an issue, you beat them up first. Then you give them a candy after. You see, that I don't know how sweet that candy is going to be. And then, so by the time they get even the candy, they have the pain of the beating on their head. You see, and then so you created a second political issue that now you have to solve with I don't know now that time with what. But
just to compliment what Mr. Tchameni is saying, one would have imagined that with the gravity of these demands from 2016, how the things have evolved. Talking in respect of this issue of failed leadership or absentee leadership that you mentioned, I want to agree with you, because I would have imagined that the head of state in person would have visited Buea and Bamenda.
Exactly, sir.
To address Anglophone Cameroonians, to assure them that these issues are being taken seriously, the concerns you have raised are being taken seriously, and give me a reasonable period of time. Let me put in place the necessary structures to address and assuage these concerns. I think that everybody would have been pacified. But when you stay quiet, I hear some journalist wrote a book on the virtues of being silent, and he was giving a mention très bien with regards to the head of states being silent in the face of challenging issues of state. But I think that this is one example where his whole thesis and theorem in that book should be revisited, to say that this is an opportunity where keeping silent has failed woefully and has even poked more fire than one would have imagined. Because I am just imagining that when do you see the head of state come to Buea to say that even in his broken English, the one that he spoke to Mo Ibrahim, we will hear him, we will understand him, and we will feel him as our leader.
That's right.
But there is a vacuum. There is a vacuum created by that absence, and I think it's spiking the issue and degenerating it. Yes.
Sir, you talked about the vacuum, but pundits of the government will be clear that the head of state has been given firm instructions to its ministers, and that the head of state speaks through its ministers. We've had the first, when the conflict started, the Prime Minister, head of government, Philemon Yang, the then Prime Minister, visited Buea and Bamenda, dialogue with the people. A new Prime Minister was appointed, Chief Dr. Joseph John Gute. He visited Bamenda and Buya, dialogue with the people. Minister Paul Atanganji, Minister of Territorial Administration, has made a series of trips in Northwest and the Southwest region to dialogue with the people. We've had the Minister of Armed Forces, Joseph Betty Asomo, was in Bamenda again. So he said he came on the firm instruction of the head of state, and that the head of state sent his condolence message to those who were killed, to the family of those who were killed, and also a message of solidarity to those who were wounded and those who are suffering. And you are saying that there's that vacuum. Are these people talking on their behalves, or not that the head of state, as we are meant to understand?
Well, I think that the time has come, and then in fact has passed even, where the people are expecting to hear from the horse's mouth, from the leader himself. And then, you know, I understand that the last time I was here, I told you about the training that Mr. Biya has received at the École des Administrateurs d'Outre-mer, you know, which is a training school for French people to go and rule the colonies. And then, you know, so I think he's still a prisoner of that training. That makes him see himself not as an emanation of his people, but as a foreign envoy to come and then rule the people. So for him, he feels that somehow he will lose his sovereign status if he descends to go and talk to people. And I think it's this. I lived in West Africa for a long time. You know, I was forced into exile there in 1991, and then I've actually been going back and forth since that time. And then what I see in West Africa, a head of state talking to everybody. Even if you're the head of a small association, the head of state will see you, talk to you. That's leadership. You cannot be a president of a country. You don't visit part of your country. You stay and then you send envoys, you know, and then, you know, so people will view that as a discipline.
Not only sending envoys, but sending envoys with a bifurcated message.
Exactly.
With different messages.
Okay. That's right. You know, so that's a very serious issue. So we have that issue. But now the problem is that still though, we have to, I don't think we can change Mr. Biya. He's too old to be changed. I mean, when I say change, not change as a president, but that change as a person.
The change that he had from a special envoy
I don't think that he will. The problem now that we are facing is how do we solve the problem that we have as a country, despite a leader that is absentee or the failed leader. How do we do that?
We're coming to you on that. Let's go to US. Mr. Ngalim, are you there? Are you there?
I am here.
You listen to the communique I read, and also I'm sure you have the communique. You listen to Barrister Nkea. You are a legal mind. You followed the appearance of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Lejume Belambela, at the United Nations. Is a contrast to this communique, because Lejume Belambela spoke entirely in French, and there he said, you know, we are returning to normalcy in the restive Northwest and Southwest region. But when you look at the communique that we just read, it's telling us the contrary. What are we missing?
Javis, I think last week I made a point here, and that was the government does not act in confused ranks. The government of Cameroon is very faithful to its policies of divide and rule, and this is one of those areas where they are emphatic on dividing public, both national and international opinion on what is happening. They intentionally give one message to one audience and give another message to another audience. You remember last week, Betty Asomo was in Bamenda declaring the second phase of the war, the third phase of the war, whatsoever. And John Gute was in Bamenda declaring peace, in Boya declaring peace. While Cyril Atongfak is in Yaoundé emphasizing on the need to eradicate, on the determination to eradicate anything in Cameroon, Lejeune Belambela is at the United Nations saying peace has returned. And one thing I noted in Belambela's speech at the UN is he did not talk of terrorists. He spoke this time of armed groups. But in Atomfact's communique, he is still talking of terrorists. So the message they are trying to send across to the international community is we have the control of what is happening in the restive southern Cameroons. And you should stay out because we are working on everything to push our agenda through. And we have been succeeding. The commissions we have set in place have been working, and stay put, stay where you are. And then in Cameroon, they are showing to the population in Cameroon that they are still strong enough to win this thing militarily. And of course, this is not something that could be won militarily. When you follow Barrister Nkea's analysis of this document from a legal perspective, you see that the government of Cameroon, through a military spokesperson, is rather admitting that they have failed to do what they had promised to do. Remember, it was supposed to be a 2-week war. Now, the spokesperson of the military, 5 years later himself, is identifying that the Amazonian fighters are now heavily armed. They now use improvised explosive devices. They use anti-tank rocket launchers, and they open fire at will. They can kill 15 soldiers, according to the spokesperson's communique at a go. This, I don't know what he's trying to defend, but he is in fact saying the military strategy has failed. So if he wants to look at this communique from another perspective, he would be accepting that the military has failed. And of course, when he evokes the international criminal law perspective or the international humanitarian law perspective into this, he is telling soldiers who take orders from them that they should be careful. Because when or if the international criminal system has to take on this case at some point, they are going to apply the rules of international criminal law. And the rules of international criminal law are very clear. Criminal responsibility is individual, and you cannot use instructions from hierarchy as an excuse to have committed offenses against populations in times of war. So Atomfac is clearly telling soldiers in this communique that at some point, we are not going to have your back. You are going to be responsible for any action that you do, because international law has, the war has now moved from a regime of domestic law to international law. And once he says this, he opens up a box to clearly say that government's failure to listen and to handle this within the time frame that was reasonable enough has exposed government to a Pandora's box that they cannot be able to contain.
Okay.
In the communique, he is talking about aligning with fundamentalist groups, which of course it is not true. We know that Amazonians have aligned with the Biafrans in Nigeria, and that collaboration seems to have touched the government of Cameroon to its core, because since that collaboration happened between the Amazonian Governing Council of Ayabacho Lucas and Namdu Kanu of Biafra, firepower and the intensity of what is happening on the ground has increased. And these guys have pledged that they are going to collaborate and use intelligence or whatsoever between Biafra and Amazonia.
So you are confirming,
increase fire.
You are confirming, you are confirming that Cyril Serge Atomfak is right, that we are now under foreign attack.
Yes, of course, that is what he has said. But this is not foreign attack. This is what, according to them, is a domestic attack. Remember, Ambazonians
but on the communique, it says that it is foreign attack.
This is an international war. Ambazonians have always said they are fighting against a foreign government. Government has always insisted that they are fighting against extremists within the territory. But these extremists, in the eyes of the government, have now partnered with a foreign or with an international or foreign group to fight against the government. Therefore, it is a domestic attack with external support.
Okay.
It would be external attack if it were being done without any complicity from within.
Okay. I'll be coming back to you, Barrister Nkea. Maybe you want to try some other things so that I'll get to Mr. Djeukam.
Yes. I was just looking at the communique again, and like I said, you have to look at the words that are used and the context. And here, that word, the insurgents, is an invading force. And to talk about an insurgent in law is an invading force. And they didn't make an error. In the first paragraph, the communique talks about heavily armed terrorists. In the second paragraph, they are referred to as insurgents, meaning that they are an invading force. And then he goes on. But more particularly, if you look at the toll, that is why I said in my opening statement that this communique gives the impression that there is an increase and intensification of both weaponry and fighting. If you look at the toll, the toll on the military side, the communique has used
15?
He didn't say 15, he said about 15. What that tells you in propaganda language is that there are more than 30.
Yeah.
They have just tried to manage the perception of people to say that
To
about
control damage.
yet, you know, no, it's a propaganda outfit. It's a propaganda mechanism to say that it's about 15. About 15 means what? Means what number? I don't know if you get the point. So when you come back into all this at the end,
And no number of civilians will.
no, they didn't make reference. They just said
number of civilians.
soldier and several civilians killed. That is even more ridiculous, because in a state like this, where the government should be more concerned about the protection of civilian population than the military are trained to fight, and they expect death as a repercussion in the course of fighting. And all international laws protect unarmed civilians. And that is supposed to be the mission why the military people went to Bamesing or wherever, to protect civilians. And if the government is unable to tell us how many civilians died in the process, it is deliberate. It is deliberate. But again, Mr. Javis, like I was trying to say before, if you look at all this, it brings into question what legal regime are we under at the moment. And I say this because if you look at section 9,
you guys, the issue of
yes,
section 9.
section 9 of the Constitution, you would assume that, in fact, you will conclude that there's a constitutional breach of the principle of bilingualism and the principle of bijuralism. Because when you look at it, the French version offers a different emergency regime, and the English version offers a different emergency regime. And when you interpret this, section 9 together with section 3 of the Constitution, which says that, I will read from my Constitution here. Section 3 says that, section 3, yes, it states that, no, in fact, there is this provision which talks about the language of let me see, 1 sub 3, sorry, section article 1 sub 3 of the Constitution. The official languages of the Republic of Cameroon shall be English. It uses the mandatory shall be English and French, both languages having the same status. Now, what this means is that when there is this conflict between the English version and the French version, it means that that provision of the Constitution has not been properly rendered. There's a breach. And we are talking about the fundamental law of the land. And why am I saying that these regimes are different? If you look at Article 9, the French version says, I mean, the English version says, the President of the Republic may, where circumstances so warrant, declare by decree, that's 1, Section 9, Article 9, Sub 1, a state of emergency, which shall confer upon him such special powers as may be provided by law. Sub 2 talks about in the event of serious threat to the nation's territorial integrity or to its existence, its independence or institution, the President of the Republic may decree a state of siege by decree and take measures as he may deem necessary. Now, if you look at the French equivalent of this section, a state of siege is given the interpretation l'état d'exception, which is not the same. It is not the same. These are different topologies, as you would say. These are different regimes. They are different. So if the head of state were to come out now, because I assume from this communique that Cameroon, the territorial integrity of Cameroon is at stake. When the Ministry of Defense says they are invading forces, they are using, they are in collaboration with some international terrorists, and all this, it tells you that the territorial integrity of Cameroon is at stake. In fact, the whole idea of the secessionist fight is putting the territorial integrity of Cameroon, as it were, at stake. So we had expected that you cannot fight this kind of conflict. You cannot requisition the military in this kind of way without resorting to the law. And that has not been done.
Because we don't have a clear-cut legal regime that we are using for the war.
It is deliberate. Because if you look at Article 9 Sub 1 of the Constitution, in the case of a state of emergency, the law of interpretation, which is the law number 90/47, it says that it cannot be for more than 3 months. So if the head of state had declared a state of emergency in 2016, it would have not exceeded 6 months, because he has the powers to renew it only once. And once he renews it only once, he has now to submit the issue to Parliament. If the threat persists, he has to submit it to Parliament. And so the head of state is very careful. That is political maneuvering, because now he's afraid to resort to the law, because he would have been compelled to table the question of the Southern Cameroon's issue in Parliament,
which has not been officially discussed.
Which has not been officially done, because you cannot go to Parliament and say that there is a threat. What is the nature of the threat? Why are people raising arms? Why are people agitating? Parliament will want to look at it from a holistic perspective, and that would be an opportunity for Parliament to address the question, the issue. But so he avoids that. My brother, if you are living here now to the southwest region, you will encounter at least 7 military checkpoints on the road, heavily armed military people on the road, mixed control. And one of the issues that is most painful, Mr. Tchameni, is that these people don't speak English. You go to them, they stop you, they start talking to you in French. I don't speak French. And so imagine, and I say to you that 90% of the vulnerable population in the English-speaking part of Cameroon don't speak French. They still see the French language as a language of intimidation, as a language of oppression. Now, when you find a man who is supposed to be protecting you, speaking to you in a language that you don't understand, and the moment you answer in English, they take it as a provocation. So these are things which moderate our this conflict adversely, or how we approach these issues is very important.
It's an aggravating circumstance.
It is.
Okay, Mr. Djeukam Tchameni, you've listened to the legal framework. Let's come now politically, the political undertone that it has. Le juge Bela was at the United Nations General Assembly. We understand that Cameroon is a bilingual country, expecting that when you are talking in front of an international audience, English should be at least a core to prove that, okay, we are bilingual. But his entirely speech was in French, accepted. Now he's giving a different dispensation as of what we have in the communique.
That's right.
His outing is that calm normalcy is returning. He stated a lot of concessions that the government has arrived at to mitigate the conflict, that everything is normal. But when you look at the legal framework where Barrister Nkea and Ngalim are coming from, is totally different.
That's right.
You're a politician. Why? What are we getting? What are we not understanding politically?
Well, I said earlier that this country was wrongly constructed at the base. We have had in our history a series of circumstances that have complicated our lives or have rendered our country complicated. One, the UN chose to issue what was a German colony, not to one, but to two different countries, and failed at the time it was ready to go to independence to reunify the whole country and then take it at once into independence. The UK took British Cameroon and then broke it into two, Northern Cameroons and then Southern Cameroons. Nobody really knows.
Convenience purposes.
Exactly, because those that know the results of the referendum of February 1961 will recall that if they have used Northern and Southern Cameroon as one constituency, the whole of it will have come to Cameroon.
Yes.
They decided to do one referendum in two different constituencies. You know why? That's again another issue. And then you have this back deal between the UK and France, but with France itself already issuing a fake independence, crushing out the nationalist movement, raising their own leaders, giving them independence, giving them the power, without even going through. Mr. Aijo was nominated president. He didn't go through
The election. It was not
election.
elected.
He was not elected. So you see that when in 1961, Mr. Foncha sits with Aijo, I'm asking myself, who are you sitting with? This country is at war.
Yeah.
It has been at war for 6 years, and then we will continue to be at war 9 years after. And the legitimacy of Aijo was questionable. They had all the rights. I mean, Foncha, Andele, and all the delegation had all the right to question. But when you go and read the minutes of that meeting, I mean, you know, with the exception of Fonlon, Doctor, yes, that was bringing a different voice, and then that was being silenced by the elected officials telling him, "Look, you just hear technical capacity.
You have just accompanied us.
You just accompanied us. Just shut up, right?" No. You know, so they were. I mean, the reverence that they had toward Aijo. I mean, Ndele as well as Foncha. I have all those texts. That constitutional conference was a farce.
Yeah.
And those, you are a lawyer, if you read the 1961 Federal Constitution, the only federalism in there is the word federal. Because Mr. Aijo had all the powers. He was the one appointing the prime ministers in both states. He could do basically anything that he wanted. And France has had, and then that's an historical fact, an annexation agenda. It was clear. It was, like even I just said it at the conference in 1961, that everything that we do is just temporarily. It's temporary. And then you know why? It was because they couldn't fight on two fronts, UPC and then the Anglophone. So they kind of say, okay, yeah, they kept federalism. The time for us to finish, to get you to support us in the fight against UPC. And then when they finish, and then, I have a tape of Foncha, saying proudly how the mobile wing were tracking the terrorists, UPC terrorists and stuff like that. So he helped Aidjo fight the UPC. Now when Aidjo and France vanquished UPC, now they turn against him. And then wipe out that thing. Because some people are asking, why did they do that in 72 instead of 1966? Because in 1966...
there was one party already.
It was, and do you remember who called for a unified party?
I think it was Muna.
Ndele.
Ndele.
He's the one that did it. So when I bring all of this together like this is to say to the young generation that this country started in the wrong footing. I'm not trying to blame all the elders and then say they were bad, all of them were bad or something. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying they themselves found themselves in very complex...
in a trance.
Complex situation.
They were the deep blue sea.
That's right. Because the UN were doing things that went right. The UK and France, that were very influential, were also doing things that went right. And then, so you will see the delegation of Southern Cameroons coming there divided. They were completely divided and absolutely unprepared.
It means that the war was unavoidable, based on what you are saying.
Look, the stage was set from the onset to arrive at this crisis because nobody, people were not genuine in none of the things that they were doing at that time.
Now, how do we go from here?
That's exactly where I think that we have to be politically creative. Because what has happened there is that at the conference, everybody thought that they were kind of tricking the other person, that, okay, maybe we could get this and then later on we will get that. But, what you saw is that there was a system that had a lot of force. That is, you had basically a territory that were fighting against, they were not fighting, they were pitting themselves against a very organized, that is, when I look at the delegation of Mr. Foncha, and then he was there with Mr. Muna, Mr. Ndele, and then they had the police chief, and then the chief prosecutor, the prosecutor general. In front, yes, you had Aidjo, and in fact, you had a government. And then plus behind that, you had those French advisors that were there. So the setting was so unbalanced that nothing balanced could come. Nothing balanced could come out of it. So we missed out. Now, who is to blame for that missing out? That is, we missed out on this project that UPC and KNDP and One Cameroon had of saying, can we unify first and then walk hand in hand toward independence? Maybe things would have been better. But now, if we go with ifs, can't do anything. The problem is that now we are faced with this problem.
Yes, we
are faced with the problem today. And when I look at it, and I say to myself, one, we have a government that is normally ultimately responsible for our security. They say that they are elected. So normally they should take full responsibility.
You said they say,
but clearly,
when you say they say they're elected, what do you mean? Do you mean
oh,
that
you
they
know, I
have
mean,
never been-
we all know. Come on, you know,
this is for the sake of clarity.
I ran.
No, this is for the sake of clarity.
I ran for
You
president.
are a senior figure in
Yes,
the country. So
I
you should
ran
tell
for
us.
president in 2004, and then after that election, well, in the course of the election, in fact, during the campaign, I explained to the Cameroonian people that the electoral code of Cameroon made it impossible for anyone other than Mr. Biya to win. I am glad that some high lawyers just found that out in 2018, that is 14 years after, but it is the truth that the way the electoral code, and then not only the electoral code, but because that electoral code is written in the case of a political dispensation that is defined by the Constitution, the whole thing makes it impossible for anyone to win. But let's grant one thing, is that it's the legal government, all right? So, but we said earlier that there is a fair leadership. Clearly, the man has proclaimed himself head of state, but he's not even doing what a leader of a nation must do. So the question is, what do we do to make things move? And for that, I want to remind people of the French mindset. Never in the history of France, never in the colonial history of France has France granted anything without bitter struggle. Never. France is not England. England will find a trickish way. They will connive here and there, give here, take there, maintain the thing to their advantage.
Sense of balance.
France is brutal and knows no compromise. And it is France that has set the state that we have in Cameroon today. It's very important to understand it. The notion of pure negotiation that can produce a result is not part of the French mindset. And therefore, when you're dealing with France, you have to deal with them in a language that they can understand. And that language can only be a language of mustering enough force to make it impossible for them to do otherwise than what you want to do.
Okay. We'll be coming back to you. Let's get to U.S. Mr. Ngalim
Javis.
Mr. Tchameni is stating that the foundation was set on the wrong premise. That's why we are where we are. And he made some allusions that, based on the electoral code, it's difficult for someone to win an election. In his words, in 2 weeks edition, he said even Jesus or Muhammad comes down in this current electoral code, nobody will win an election in this country.
Javis, I've always held the view that the legal and administrative and political framework of Cameroon is meant in such a way that only one person or only one group of people can survive in anything. And that is why we are where we are today. Because if the framework had been set in such a way that the population or all concerned parties could propose solutions to problems, we shouldn't have been at war today for 5 years. I like the historical perspective that Mr. Djeukam has made about this, but I would like to put it in another context, in the context that takes it out of the common Cameroon problems. Because the Southern Cameroon's problem is not entirely, or it's not a Cameroon problem. It is a problem, as Mr. Djeukam has said, that is founded in history. It is not entirely a bad governance problem. It is a problem that grew up with whatever came to be Cameroon as it is today. And the fundamental question that I look at is, why did the United Nations give all other territories, all other colonies, the option to exercise their right to self-determination as a people under international law, but limited Southern Cameroonians and British Northern Cameroonians' right to exercise this right to self-determination? In fact, the questions that were put at the plebiscite were not two questions. That was just one question, because under United Nations laws governing decolonization process, independence could be attained by direct independence, by association, or by integration. But in this case, it was one thing, only by integration. Are you going this way or are you going that way? That was not an option. It should have been, do you want to attain independence directly? Do you want to attain independence by associating with Nigeria or Cameroon? Or do you want to attain independence by integrating with Nigeria, with Cameroon? That should have been the absolute exercise of the right to self-determination. And by the way, why should have there been a plebiscite? Why did they not give a plebiscite to other countries? So this is actually the foundation of the problem. And then talking about the Fumban conference, where we had these two people come together.
Because Mr. Tchameni said one person, Mr. Tchameni said one person was illegal in terms of sitting on that position. Maybe I may be wrong in his context. That Ahijo was appointed, though, so he was nominated to be president. So Foncha coming in his legality to sit with an illegality to lead to what we have now. Legitimacy.
No, you know,
that Ahijo lacked
Javis,
legitimacy.
Yeah, the Republic of Cameroon had attained their independence by 1961, by the time of the Fumban Conference. And the Southern Cameroons was not part of La République du Cameroun. So as a citizen of La République du Cameroon, Mr. Djeukam is supposed to be worried about Ahijo's legitimacy at that conference. But it's not Foncha's place to get in to ask questions about the processes that La République du Cameroon used to appoint, to elect, or to designate their leader. That will be some sort of interference, which was not within Foncha's resort. But by the way, at that time, Foncha did not even have the powers to execute or to engage into international relations, because as a trust territory, you did not have the powers to engage into international relations. That was a preserve of the trust of the trusteeship masters, that is the UK. It was the role of the UK now to ask those questions. And at Fumban, it's supposed to have been three parties. The first party was the Southern Cameroons, the second party was the La République du Cameroon, and the third party was supposed to be the United Kingdom. These are in the wordings of Resolution 1608. But before Resolution 1608, I think it's 1342, the United Nations had said they would send constitutional law experts, representatives of Britain, La République du Cameroon, and the Southern Cameroons to sit and talk. But after the plebiscite, the United Nations withdrew the option of sending in constitutional law experts from the United Nations. This was based on deliberations on the floor of the Assembly. And this is a violation of contractual obligations between the United Nations and the British Cameroons, both Northern and Southern. So the United Nations actually laid the foundation on very bad grounds. And this should be the foundational framework on which we are analyzing this problem. Because if we want to merge it with all other problems that the successive regimes of Ahijo and Biya have caused in Cameroon, this problem is going to disappear. And if it disappears from the negotiation table, as it did at what they called the Grand National Dialogue, the problem disappeared from there because it transformed into a Cameroonian problem, and the identity and the right to self-determination of the Southern Cameroonians was sent to the background. That is why after the Grand National Dialogue, nothing has changed.
Okay.
The war is instead intensifying. So my take-home message here is simple.
Okay.
When we're talking about this war, I'm coming, Javis. When we're talking about this war, let us look at it entirely as one problem that is caused by history and can be resolved by history. And if we are talking about sitting down to resolve this problem, there should be two principal parties. And these parties should be the Southern Cameroons, represented by their personally chosen delegates, and the Republic of Cameroon. That is the only way we can come to resolve this problem.
Okay.
And of course, we need to have a mediator between the two sides, helping to facilitate mediation so that we can come back to a situation of justice where peace can reign. Thank you, Javis.
Barrister Nkea, I want us to go back to that document to look at the second page. That is the second paragraph to that document. So that we'll look at it from a legal mind, while I come to Mr. Djeukam to look at it from the political perspective. It states, it should be noted that intelligence services have established with certainty that the resurgence of these terrorist groups by means of quality, underlining what quality firepower, they have at their disposal and are symmetrically using is largely the result of their joint forces, underlined, with other terrorist entities, underlined, operating outside the country's borders. Now, what does this imply in legal terms?
Like I said before, it's a simple admission that the country is under attack and that the legal regime for regulating this conflict should now change, because Cameroon does not have competence to arrest a Nigerian in Nigeria, right? Cameroon does not have competence to arrest a Kenyan in Kenya. So what that means is that by saying that there are some foreign terrorist organizations that are lending forces to what they also call terrorist groups in Cameroon, it's an admission that the legal regime has evolved. It's no longer the terrorism laws of Cameroon that should regulate this armed conflict, rather but the laws that regulate international terrorism, if it is terrorism, because this is one legal term that has been misused or that has been given a political colorization to achieve a certain mischievous end. When people take up arms in the context of the Anglophone struggle, it is insincere to refer to them as terrorists. You can refer to them as secessionists. I don't want to come back to the whole narrative where the separatist fighters believe that they are not even part of La République du Cameroun. That's the first thing.
But you are a legal mind.
Yes.
I want to look at this now. You said it's not. Let's not look at it from the context of terrorism.
Yes.
Let's look at it from the context of Cameroon law. The law of Cameroon makes them terrorists.
No, what I'm saying is that laws do not operate in a vacuum, right? And when you pass laws to address or to achieve a particular aim. The aim of the anti-terrorism law in Cameroon was not to fight secession. I don't know if you get the point. It was not to fight secession. When the Constitution was drafted in Article 9, sub 1 and 2, these are the instances that were reflected. The word terrorism is not used there in Article 9, sub 1 and 2. But we try to be dishonest even in our legal engineering in this country by trying to use one dragnet to arrest, because ordinarily, if you arrest somebody who is a terrorist, in the strict sense of the word, a person who is a terrorist, you deal with him in a way that is non-conventional. But when you are dealing with somebody who is supposed to be fighting a war with you, then the general, the common, what you call common Article 3 of the General Geneva Conventions apply, which means that, which is what the state is trying to invoke here, to say that our soldiers who are not in active combat should not be attacked by Ambazonia fighters.
And vice versa.
you get the point, because that is what Common Article 3 of the Geneva Convention says, that you don't attack officers who are not in active combat. And what they are saying is that these people who were in their military talk were not in active combat. I don't know if you get the point. Now, but again, when you put this side by side with what happened in Bali, where people were shot even in the church house, that is also a protected, prohibited area for any combat activity under international humanitarian law. Churches are protected, hospitals are protected, schools are protected,
and refugee centers.
But we have seen that is what I'm trying to say, that this is not a matter of terrorism.
You have defended a lot of cases in court. I'm sure you worked on the Wazizi saga. When you are in court, which law is used to judge this combat, those accused of secession?
Yes,
which of the laws?
I would tell you that Cameroon operates under the monist regime, which means that once an international treaty is ratified by Cameroon, it has precedence over domestic laws. That is what the Constitution says. If you look at Article 45, you read it. Once Cameroon ratifies a treaty, it has preeminence over our domestic laws. So when you arrest somebody, for example, in the case of Wazizi, we were saying that you cannot read the Criminal Procedure Code in isolation with other international treaties duly ratified by Cameroon. And some people who were supposed to be senior judicial officers in the Southwest thought that no, you will read the Criminal Procedure Code line by line in exclusion to other laws of Cameroon, in exclusion to the Constitution, in exclusion to international treaties. And that is what we are struggling continuously to do, to say that when we have situations like this, we take it to the courts. And we raise, the legal issues, then we leave it to the courts to decide. Someday, history will say that we did our job to the best of our ability.
Okay.
And for example, when internet was shut down in the Northwest and Southwest, as a result of this crisis, that was the very first action that this government took. I filed up an action against the state in the High Court in Boya, and before the Constitutional Council as well. And they said, well, the Constitutional Council hasn't got jurisdiction. We said, okay, so be it. And surprisingly, the High Court in Fako said, okay, the matter has been dealt with by a superior tribunal, which is the Constitutional Council, which has a mandate to deal with constitutional issues. And since you have brought the issue of the right to freedom of information, access to information, and because the internet as it is facilitates the enjoyment of so many rights: right to education, right to research. You cannot conduct effective research without using the internet. You cannot even do financial transactions today without the internet. And so we articulated all these things, and they said, okay, those issues that you have highlighted, they bear more on constitutional rights, on rights, human rights. And in our country, we don't have a code, a Bill of Rights.
Okay.
It is embedded in the Constitution, and they say it's the Constitutional Council that has jurisdiction to interpret and enforce. So that is where we have a challenge. And then individuals don't have the right to approach the Constitutional Council. So you see where Mr. Tchameni was saying that the way the laws of this country have been framed are such that only the powerful can survive.
Okay, briefly before coming to him, you said some people who were supposed to be higher.
Yes.
Legal. When you say some people who were supposed to, are you insinuating that they are by professionalism, they are not upholding the professionalism?
Well, of course, that's what I'm saying. What I'm saying, I didn't throw water in my mouth. I was saying that you would expect that top judicial officers in the region should be the ones to enforce the law, should be the one to give a direction on how the law should be enforced. That's what I'm saying. And when they fail, they fail. When they fail, they fail.
Okay, I needed that clarification. So, where do we go from here? You laid down last 2 weeks. You laid down a series of steps.
All right. So one thing that I just said just now was that when you have an adversary or an enemy, you need to understand the nature of who you're fighting against, so that you may have a chance to achieve victory of some form of concession from that person. And then when you know that you are dealing with a regime that is fundamentally totalitarian in its approach, because you have to understand that the French, the Cameroonian state was created by a decree of France.
Yes.
And then for a long time move on, were run by France. And when they came to Fumban, in fact, they came in with a modified constitution of the Constitution of the Republic of Cameroon. Just modified it and then passed it through the Parliament of the Republic of Cameroon. He never went back to the legislature, the legislator of Southern Cameroon. That constitution never went there. So you have to understand the frame of mind, and then that's why I said that, and then study properly the history, not only the limited history of France in Cameroon, but the history of France, the colonial history of France in Africa, and then everywhere else where France went, Vietnam, and everywhere. They know not negotiation without a rapport de force. Mm-hmm. And that's how they think. So if you want to achieve change through a French colonial system, then you have to learn how to build
The
force
to fight.
Now, let me say two things, and on which I do not wish to be misinterpreted. The first thing I'll say to Mr. Ngalim is that when you fight, you don't have the luxury to start the fight with the end. Mm-hmm. In other words, if Mr. Ngalim wants to create a state of Ambazonia or Southern Cameroon or whatever, that's a goal, but that's not the point of departure. Yeah. Because the point of departure today is that there's one Cameroon with one president at the head of it.
As of now.
So as of now. So if you get involved in politics and then you lose track of reality, you cannot change a reality that you don't admit. Yeah. If I don't admit that this table is there, I can move the table. So now I can wish to break the table in 4, 3, or whatever, but I have to first accept that this is what I have, and then we go from there.
Okay.
So I just want to remind him that he and we are citizens of the same country for now. I'm not a citizen of a different country.
As of the
yes, that's right. So that's for now. Tomorrow, maybe
it can be different.
Yes. Now, the second thing is that I want to also say something regarding to what the barrister here said concerning the internationally recognized right of people to take up arms.
Yes.
That's internationally recognized. Now, once, and then I've been talking with the secessionists or restorationists, whatever name that they call themselves, since 1993. And then I said, if you decide that you are going to exercise armed struggle, the moment you say secession, then the option of armed struggle is the only one that you really have. That's the main one, not the only one, but the main one. Now, if you decide to go that route, which you can do, then you have to have a unified political structure that has control over the armed group. If you don't, you expose yourself to become nothing but the criminal warlords. I told them that I had almost a fist fight with Taylor, because I was in Ouagadougou with him in Gerandi's house as they were preparing to attack Liberia. That was in 1988. And we had joined at the time, all the militant groups of Africa were, like Ouagadougou was like a mecca. And then we had plans that, we will help this group, they will free this country, and then from there we could use it as a base to free the other countries and stuff like that. So at the time, there was discussion as to whether we would support Taylor or someone else. And then, Taylor came to make his point. And then all he was saying is that it's going to arm young people, and then they're going to, so he was talking a militaristic language. And then I told him, if you fight, any war is political, and it has to have a clear political leadership. You do not give weapon to young people and then send them out there, because those young people will turn those weapons against the people that you're fighting for. And then you end up looking like a criminal. And then, where is he today? He's in jail. So I'm saying to the people that have decided to take up arms, that it is your internationally recognized right to do so, particularly if you have a government that does not give you any other issue. But the moment you do that, you are in a very dangerous spot, because those international laws of war applies to you too, and individually, and then as well as to the people that are giving orders. Right now, I don't know what deals they have with the different countries from where they're giving orders, but when the thing gets bad, it will not only be the military of Mr. Biya. It's going to be any person that has attacked a civilian. Yeah. And then you will not be able to say, well, those people would not working under me. It wasn't okay. I'm telling you, you'll be all responsible for every exaction that every single guy that has a gun there, calling himself Ambazonia, would do. So if that's the second thing.
Political structure.
Yes, you have to have a clear political structure, and then have the control over some armed groups, so that it is known that I give instruction to these people, and then those people I take for the actions, and then those other people I don't, because I don't know who they are.
Okay, briefly. Where do we go from here? We're out of time.
Yes. Okay. So very quickly. So having said that, so I'm just saying that to just lay the foundation to the rest of the thing, is that in Cameroon today, you have the people of Cameroon, and then you have the political actors, and then so we are all suffering as a result of a bad government, overbearing former colonial power, and then the proper disorganization of the various political and structures, forces that are in Cameroon. And then I feel that the way out of this, the end road, is that we have to go toward a referendum. That's my abiding position, is that we have to move toward, this problem cannot be solved militarily, and then we cannot escape the voice of the people. The people have to speak. It cannot be just some people deciding that, oh, I'm Amazonian, or the other people say, no, you Cameroonian, stuff like that. No, you have to get the people to speak. Okay. And then in that case, we have to get the political actors that really are wishing well for Cameroon to learn how to work together to put pressure on this government that I say is genetically incapable of solving this problem.
Okay. Thank you very much. We are slowly out of time, but Mr. Ngalim, your last word before we go, we'll start with you before moving to the other members. Briefly.
All right, thank you very much, Javis. I think one of the problems we have where intellectuals of Southern Cameroon's background don't want to appear on TV and talk about this problem in within Cameroon is because when you restate the historical facts as they are, you are termed an Amazonian. I take that with exception because when someone like Mr. Djeukam states historical facts and kind of cherry picks them, and I try to bring out that clarification, I am not in any way saying that what he has done or what he has said does not fit reality. We all know the reality. As of 1961, the two Cameroons became one. In fact, they are one. Nobody disputes that. But if we want to look at solutions to this problem, we need to state the historical facts as they are, put them within the context of history and law and politics, and look for solutions to this. That is why my point was, you cannot talk about solving the Amazonian crisis or the Southern Cameroonians issue without looking fundamentally at the right to self-determination and the identity as a people.
And that he has not
These have been
disputed.
recognized by the African Commission of Human and People's Rights in Banjul.
That he has not.
Sorry.
That he has not disputed.
I haven't disputed that fact.
I agree, but listen. What I am saying is there are some historical facts that he did not identify. And when I put them in context, he kind of said, that is my reading of what he said, that I want to create an Amazonian state.
No.
What I'm saying here is that Javis is this.
You got him wrong.
This tendency.
No, you got him wrong. He was just using an example that if whoever may want to.
I am giving my understanding of what he said. You are giving your understanding of what he said, and yes. I respect Mr. Tchameni a lot for his position on this.
Yeah,
but I just wanted to make that clarification. And for the way forward, let us be very clear on what we want. We cannot go forward if we do not accept the historical facts and if we do not designate our own people to talk. But my only fear is if we want to tackle this as a Cameroonian problem, we would be creating a problem that will never be resolved.
Okay.
Because let us look at Nigeria next door. That is what Biafra did some years back, and Biafra is back on the table. So giving a sustainable solution to this is letting the Southern Cameroon's problem be the Southern Cameroon's problem, and let it be decided by the people of Southern Cameroon using their right to self-determination. Thank you.
Before we go, Barrister Nkea, your last word, so that we'll take his own last word.
Yes, I would just say that as a way forward, I've said this before, is that we need a constitutional restructuring of our constitution, whether it's by way of a referendum or by way of whatever form. But we need to amend the constitution to reinvest federalism. And that federalism must take the historical background of this country into
a referendum to decide that.
To decide that, it must take the historical realities of this country into consideration, which is basically Anglophone, Francophone. And within this structure, these federal states, I'm saying very clearly that it should be a two-state federation. Within this, the different states, you could have regions and or some decentralized entities. That is a different thing. But at the level of state power, it should be very clear. But again, to create guarantees of trust, right, we should have a window which says that within a period of 10-15 years, there should be a referendum for the people of this part, because the French people of former East Cameroon have never threatened to go. Let me finish. They have never threatened to go. It is us from this English side who say we want to go. So they should create a window. Say within the next 15-20 years after federal constitution, these people will have the right to say again whether they want to stay or they want to move out.
Briefly before we go, your last word.
Well, I have to give homage to our elders that fought the British, the UN, and then sought to reunify
Cameroon.
Cameroon. And then in their spirit, they were not looking at us as Francophone or Anglophone. They were looking at us as African people. We've been colonized by both. And then I have an uncle. I'm blessed to have an uncle that was very, very deeply involved into these things. And then the way they saw it was, we would sit down and then see what we take here and there before independence.
Okay.
The intention was to, before independence, sit down and then go together toward independence and then create something that is specifically Cameroon. I, for one, believe that as long as you will have in this country Anglophile Francophobes and Francophile Anglophobes, you will be sitting on a bomb.
Okay, sir.
I think that what we need to do is to look ourselves as African people, and then to look at those our common heritage, which is made of British, French, Arabs, Muslim, Christian, and African heritage, and then try to use that intelligently to create a dispensation that makes it possible for all Cameroonians to live in peace and prosperity.
Thank you very much, sir, for coming. Thank you, Barrister, for coming. Thank you all for watching. We are now on Canasat, channel 309 on Canasat. And of course, this program will be rebroadcast on Monday at exactly 9:30, this same Sunday at 10:30 on our YouTube channel. BT Media Group is our YouTube channel, Facebook, My Media Prime, Twitter, My Media Prime. I leave you with this: no matter the matter, what matter is your matter. Bye-bye.
Time flies,
Yeah.
Honestly.